Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here are some of the top stories we've been following. The city of Lethbridge has extended its mandatory face covering bylaw. We will explain for how long. Alex Schadenberg from Euthanasia Prevention Coalition speaks out against a new bill being debated which would allow for assisted death for Canadians who are not dying. And we hear about a Christian organization helping those who've been left devastated by a hurricane in Honduras.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. The City of Lethbridge has extended the mandatory face covering bylaw until at least February 23rd. In a vote of 6-3 last night, Council voted for the extension, which was set to expire on December 31st. Mayor Chris Spearman says with increased cases of COVID-19, more needs to be done. Spearman adds the Community Standing Policy Committee will discuss another potential extension on February the 11th.
I think we need to get input. I think that's the goal. We want to test out our new Standing Policy Committee process, and this is a way to get more public input, and I think we have to take all information into account.
For me especially, I was really in favor of that. Let's educate people. Now I've decided that some people are uneducable, and I think there may be a point, I don't know what point that is, where we have to do more enforcement. That's my own personal opinion. Whether my colleagues espouse that opinion or not, I don't know.
As of Monday, Lethbridge had 206 active cases of COVID-19. Bill 21 was implemented today in Alberta. It will allow police to enforce stricter impaired driving laws. It will allow drivers to dispute their fines or pay their tickets online. Under this new bill, impaired drivers could face stricter fines and lose their vehicles for up to 30 days. Almost all first-time impaired driving offences will be taken care of by Safe Roads Alberta.
Safe Roads has adjudicators based out of Edmonton. So anytime somebody wants to appeal these roadside sanctions that we've placed on them, that appeal process goes through Safe Roads in Edmonton. I don't know the exact number of adjudicators they have up there right now, but I can tell you if someone does want to appeal to Safe Roads, they have 7 days from the time these sanctions are put in place to make that appeal. After that 7-day period is done, they have that adjudicator process within 21 days. From that point, the adjudicator has 30 days to actually make a decision as to whether or not to overturn these sanctions.
Frontline officers for Lethbridge Police have all been trained on this new bill, and city officials say police will also purchase 20 additional roadside screening devices to help in their fight against drinking and driving. Lethbridge Police have arrested a Surrey, BC man on drug trafficking charges earlier today. Police executed a search warrant on a home on West Side Drive. More than 90 grams of cocaine were seized with a value of around $9,000. Police also confiscated around $7,400 in cash. 31-year-old Michael Abate faces various drug trafficking and possession charges. He remains in jail awaiting bail. When it comes to gun violence in Canada, more needs to be done to protect our border with the United States. Now that's according to the president of the National Police Federation. Brian Sauvé says focusing more on the Canada-US border will prevent more illegal guns from entering our country.
If we really want to focus on the illegal trafficking of firearms, then perhaps we as Canadians decide on focusing on reinforcing those border enforcement teams, making a concerted effort to look at that border, which is the border with the largest manufacturer of small arms in the world, the United States. So there have been a lot of illegally trafficked firearms from the United States that commit crimes in Canada.
Catch the full interview with Brian Sauvé and Jeanette Rocher coming up in the second half of our program. Many people describe obsessive-compulsive disorder, or OCD, as something that takes over your life. If you combine those feelings of distress with a pandemic, even more challenges arise. Video journalist Ainsley O'Reilly discovered that the mental health disorder is treatable, and local psychologists are having a hand in that process.
OCD impacts roughly 3% of the population worldwide.
This is an illness that can be at the very mild end of the continuum, where there's maybe an hour spent a day engaged in these activities, or it can be at the other extreme, where their entire day is preoccupied by these obsessive thoughts and compulsive acts.
Some people say it's like a thoughts disorder, but it's almost like a feeling disorder where, like with OCD, it's a lot about how we feel. And we tend to not be able to handle the anxiety. So that is why we do the compulsion.
Associate Professor of Psychiatry at the University of Calgary, Beverly Adams, says that OCD is treatable, but during COVID-19 times, anxieties can become unbearable for patients who are already worried about contamination.
There's a real threat like COVID-19. Many of their fears are actually founded. And with obsessive compulsive disorder, which is very different than personality.
In COVID, the message is wash your hands, wash your hands, wash your hands, wash your hands, wash your hands. And so people who have a low tolerance to uncertainty and are already doing lots of washing will start to hear this as, see, I was right, my OCD is right, nothing is safe. And that's not the message of COVID.
If you're in a crisis in southern Alberta, the helpline number is 403-327-7905. For Bridge City News, I'm Ainsley O'Reilly.
There are many Canadians who are concerned about the federal government's Bill C-7. It's an act to amend the criminal code to allow assisted death for Canadians who are not dying. A group which is fighting euthanasia Bill C-7 is Euthanasia Prevention Coalition. Joining me now is the group's executive director, Alex Schadenberg. Alex, one of your biggest concerns is the new same-day death provision in the bill?
The current legislation requires a 10-day waiting period, and Bill C-7 would eliminate that. So therefore, somebody on a bad day could go to their doctor and get approved for death and die the same day. Now, this is a very significant problem if you consider the fact that, human beings, our will to live will fluctuate. But there's more to the bill than that. Like, the bill also does one other thing. It allows an incompetent person to die by lethal injection also. So currently the legislation says that, someone has to be competent at the time of death. Whereas Bill C-7 says that as long as you were previously approved, if they came to do the act and you were incompetent, it's okay, go ahead, it's fine. There's a couple of other little things it does. It removes the 2 witnesses that are required. So when you sign on a dotted line saying, yeah, I want to die, it requires 2 witnesses. Now, your will, your power of attorney, all these things require 2 witnesses. But according to Bill C-7, if that passes, it'll only require 1 witness, and it could be a nurse. So, obviously speaking, this bill is designed to simply reduce the type of safeguards that are already in the law.
So the hearings have wrapped up for Bill C-7. What's next?
It's going to be going through its final debates in Parliament. Parliament would like to have it passed by December 18th. So it's got to go to its final debate, and then it goes to what they call the final vote, the 3rd reading vote, and then it'll go back to the Senate for a final vote. Recent articles are suggesting that the Senate, there's several senators who are wanting to demand that mental illness be allowed within the legislation. So that might be a holdup for the whole situation.
That was Alex Schadenberg, Executive Director of Euthanasia Prevention Coalition. Today is National Giving Tuesday, which is a global generosity movement. The Community Foundation of Lethbridge and Southwestern Alberta has given out their kindness grants in honor of Giving Tuesday. As Micah Quinn explains now, the kindness grants are given out as a way to support nonprofit agencies.
At the Community Foundation of Lethbridge and Southwestern Alberta, the kindness grants come from Random Act of Kindness Day back in November.
One of the things we do for that is to encourage the community to participate in kind acts, which can be anything from holding the door for someone, buying someone a coffee, that kind of thing. And then share that kind act with us on our social media, hashtag it, and we enter their names into a draw, one of 10 $500 kindness grants for the local charity of their choice.
There are 10 recipients for the kindness grants on Giving Tuesday, and Davidson says that this is just another way to show nonprofits that people care and kindness pays.
By participating in Random Act of Kindness Day and selecting or sharing that and selecting the charity of their choice, they're able to give back to the community through a different vehicle.
The Opagossan Early Intervention Society is one of the recipients of the $500 kindness grants.
The money will go towards one of our selected programs within the organization, and it is the Persons with Developmental Disabilities. And what we want to do is we want to have the children put together packages for the adults who are living with a disability in the community.
Volunteer Lethbridge acknowledges that Giving Tuesday is a way to recognize good work in the community, and volunteering plays a vital role in that.
Which is why, again, Giving Tuesday is such an important reminder for us to recognize that good work, recognize increased and changed needs in our community.
For Bridge City News, I'm Mike Quinn.
A 10-year-old Lethbridge boy is holding a food drive as part of his school project. Sydney Barantes is planning for a second trip to the Interfaith Food Bank to drop off donations he's collected.
I just kind of wanted to help people who need food, they don't have enough money to buy some, and help them out. On the first day, I was going to collect food with the bin outside, and I was going to collect food in that bin. My mom posted an ad on Facebook for me in many different groups, and we also notified the food bank about it. They posted the ad too for me to get food collected. I am tallying all the food in a chart. I feel happy to know that I'm doing something good for community and people.
You know, it's so fantastic to see youth doing such productive things in the community, and kudos to Sydney for choosing to do a food drive like this. It's going to help so many families this Christmas.
Tim Shipper from Lethbridge Toyota has donated a tire machine and tire balancing equipment to Lethbridge Collegiate Institute today. The extra equipment has helped to double the capacity of LCI's current setup. School officials say students will benefit from training on up-to-date equipment, and the donation will also bridge the school's partnership with the local industry.
Some equipment in our shop, and this equipment was used heavily by us daily on a daily basis until just about a month ago. Some members of our team came up with the idea of donating to making sure we keep all our donations local, and I found the opportunity to donate to a place like LCI where I went to school. I graduated 20 years ago this year from this very school and this very shop. I got my first taste of the automotive industry in this shop, so it's pretty cool to be able to donate to something I experienced.
The Canadian Transplant Association, Green Shirt Day organizers, and Vistaprint Corporate Solutions have created a Together Strong face mask as a special fundraiser for Canada's organ donation community.
Green Shirt Day has gone out of its way to contact different organ donation groups, organ donation awareness groups in Canada, and see if they're interested in doing a mask. And there was an interest in that, so Vistaprint was contracted to make a mask, and $5 from the sale of each mask goes to an organ donation group. So example would be Canadian Transplant Association, Heart Life Foundation out of Vancouver, and for each mask that's sold, they get their logo on the mask. They then get $5. So the Vistaprint's already sold 5,000 masks, so away we go.
On April 7th of 2018, Bernadine and Toby Boulay offered to donate their son Logan Boulay's organs following the tragic Humboldt Broncos bus crash in Saskatchewan. They did so because Logan had registered as an organ donor and had spoken to his parents about his wishes. To date, there have been over 300,000 Canadians signing up to become organ donors. Alberta Premier Jason Kenney says the widespread cancellation of more non-urgent surgeries may be necessary because the largest hospitals in the province are filling up with COVID-19 cases. Kenney says hospitals are at 91% capacity due to the coronavirus. Kenney says Alberta currently has 8,500 hospital beds. Around 2,400 are being set aside for pandemic patients, and 1/4 of those beds will be in intensive care. Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe says it's too early to say whether COVID-19 restrictions will be loosened in time to allow families to gather for Christmas. Restrictions are to continue until December 17th, and that is when government officials will decide what to do next. Moe says they could choose to extend existing measures, bring in new ones, or loosen the restriction that limits household gatherings. The limit right now is 5 people. Manitoba's Chief Public Health Officer says restrictions in his province have prevented the daily number of COVID-19 cases from rising. Dr. Brent Rusin cited projections of up to 1,000 cases per day, but yesterday the province reported just 342 new cases. Still, the number remains steady, and the percentage of people testing positive has also remained high at around 13%. In an effort to turn the tide, the government forced many non-essential retailers to close. Public gatherings of more than 5 people has also been banned. Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland says the Liberals' plan of a stimulus program, they're planning to spend up to $100 billion once the pandemic is over. Freeland says, however, that right now, the right thing to do is to attack the virus while supporting those in need.
We are very mindful, however, of the fact that our economy can get fully back up to speed only once we have the virus fully under control. And that's why we're going to be spending the winter months working on the details of this growth plan. As we build our growth plan and as we deploy it, the measure we're going to be looking at to see if we've got the job done is really around jobs.
Federal NDP leader Jagmeet Singh took aim at the Liberal government's recent economic plan, saying the measures included in the fiscal update yesterday fell well short of what Canadians expect and need.
We see a Liberal government that is not willing to ask the wealthiest to pay their fair share. They have not really taken any concrete steps to look at revenue sources from the pandemic profiteers, the excess profits made during this pandemic, nor a tax on wealth. They're in fact not even willing to really put in place any real tax measure on the web giants. They have not put in place the help to sectors that are in need.
Federal Conservative finance critic Pierre Poilievre was also unimpressed with the Liberals' fiscal update. He says the Trudeau government needs to take a page from our farmers when it comes to better planning.
The minister talked a lot about a farming analogy. As we go into this cold winter, she talked about how farmers deal with cold winters. Well, I wish that she had thought about that 3 and 4 years ago, because farmers are good planners. They store away for the winter. They build up surpluses when the sun is shining, so that when the cold, dark days of winter arrive, they have the supplies to get them through until the sun comes back up over the horizon and the snow melts and the crops are ready to be planted again.
It appears as though rural hospitals are struggling with keeping up with the demand for beds of COVID-19 patients. And it's not just in Canada, but also in the United States as well. Scotland County Hospital in Memphis, Missouri is grappling with rising coronavirus cases. The small hospital of roughly 6 doctors and 75 nurses is in crisis. Doctors are often having to make heartbreaking decisions.
So our positivity rate right now is sitting a little over 30%. That's pretty high. I mean, if you think about that, that's 1 in 3 patients tested is testing positive. Our increase in hospitalizations is definitely there.
We're limited on our beds, so we're a 25-bed facility. However, typically what limits how many patients I can put in the hospital is staffing. And of course, with the positivity rates being high, we have both staff members, nursing, as well as ancillary staff members that are in quarantine.
Staffing has been the biggest challenge. You still have all the other things that happen in regular life in addition to now COVID, and we have the majority of our staff are young mothers.
Election officials in Arizona have certified Joe Biden's narrow victory over U.S. President Donald Trump in the state. Biden won Arizona by 0.3% of the nearly 3.4 million ballots cast. That is a margin of just under 10,500 votes.
We had an extremely well-run election and saw historically high voter participation. There were more than 3.42 million ballots cast in this election, and turnout was nearly 80%. This is a 23% increase from the 2018 midterm election and an 8% increase from the 2016 presidential election. Of those 3.42 million ballots cast, over 88% of them were cast early, which provides more proof that Arizona's ballot-by-mail system works.
The alleged architect of Iran's nuclear program is dead. Mohsen Fakhrizadeh was killed in a targeted attack using a remote-controlled machine gun attached to a car. Our foreign affairs expert Lisa Daftari says many wanted Fakhrizadeh dead since he was a threat to so many.
The mainstream media keeps putting up these crazy and ridiculous headlines as to why was this guy killed? Well, why wasn't he killed earlier is the question. So many targets on this guy's back. He was a shadowy commander of the IRGC, the Revolutionary Guard Corps, which is the most brutal and vicious, deadly group, tentacle or arm of the Iranian regime. And this guy, he was the mastermind of their nuclear program, their secret nuclear program. So obviously a lot of targets on his back.
Lisa will also explain how Iran may take revenge on an Israeli city in retaliation to the Fakhrizadeh death. That interview is coming up in the second half of our program. Medical teams from Samaritan's Purse are providing much-needed critical care through their emergency field hospital in hurricane-stricken Honduras. The Christ Center charity is providing emergency shelter and materials, as well as hygiene kits to families in need. The group is also partnering with a local church to remind residents that God has not forgotten them.
We're here today to support the people of Honduras who are struggling from the aftermath of the hurricanes Eta and Iota. Many of the patients that we've seen here in the first couple of days, a lot of them are truly shell-shocked from the fact that they have just been pushed out of their homes, they're living in shelters. There's a tremendous amount of uncertainty as to the future. It's a great opportunity for us to not only meet some of their physical needs, but also to meet a lot of their spiritual needs, to let them know that Jesus loves them beyond all measure. As we've had a chance to pray for them, they weep. They weep not out of necessarily sadness, but out of the idea that there's somebody that cares for them, and honestly, that we care for them as well. It is really powerful. It's exciting.
Dear Jesus, thank you so much for this day.
When we're praying for them, we're praying in the name of Jesus. We're able to remind them at a key point in their lives that there's still hope and that there's still people that care about them and love them. This sweet little family came in and the mom was radiant. She's 2-3 months pregnant. And we got to show her baby on the ultrasound for the first time, was so happy. And then we got talking with them and we found out that they'd been displaced by the storm, and that they actually were living in the street in a makeshift shelter. But it was near their house, and they wanted to stay near their house, which was flooded. We were able to pray with them and to give them encouragement and hope that their new little baby is doing well and that they have something to look forward to in the next 6 or 8 months.
Bien, gracias también a ustedes porque lo que ustedes están haciendo es una labor que varias personas necesitamos en este lugar. Y se le agradece mucho y sé que Dios, verdad, los va a ayudar a terminar su carrera.
My hope for these patients is that they feel the love of Christ when they come in and that they see it. That they feel encouraged once they leave here, that they don't leave the same way that they came in, that they leave transformed and encouraged.
Great to see Christian groups having an impact all over the world. We've enjoyed some beautiful sunny days here in southwestern Alberta over the past few days. Even warmer temperatures are on the horizon. Full weather details are on deck. We have been enjoying some above seasonal temperatures the past few days, and that trend will continue. Jeanette Rocher is here now with a complete look at the weather forecast. Jeanette, would it be safe to say we can put away our winter coats for maybe the rest of the week?
Well, for the rest of the week, maybe, yeah, but I wouldn't get too excited just yet because next week we're going to be seeing more of those seasonal averages for this time of year. But for now, we're looking at double digits starting as soon as tomorrow on Wednesday here, high of 10. Lots of sunshine. Even the wind, not so bad for Lethbridge, 20km/h wind. Hey, we can handle that, no problem whatsoever. 13 degrees are high on Thursday under sunny skies, sunshine lasting throughout the majority of the week. 9 degrees on Friday, 13 the high for both Saturday and Sunday, and then a high of 14 degrees for next Monday with a mix of sun and cloud. I'm loving these teen temperatures, not too bad. So the almanac tells us that the average high for this time of year is around 1 degree. We're going to be seeing more of that come next week. -10 is the average low. 14 degrees was our high temperature back in 1969. We're actually almost there this week now. -31 was the chilliest day on record back in 1985. 8:07 was when the sun woke up this morning, and the bedtime for the sun today is 4:34 p.m. Just a little bit less than 8.5 hours or so of daylight. Over on the west coast tomorrow, clearing in the morning to give us lots of sunshine in both Victoria and Vancouver. 9 degrees the high in Victoria. Vancouver 8 degrees. Could see some fog dissipating in the morning as well. Lots of sunshine expected across Alberta tomorrow. Edmonton's high 7. Looking at double digits also in Calgary for a high of 10 degrees. Saskatoon, lots of sunshine with a high of -2. Could see some wind chill there. Wind chill also expected in Regina, making that -1. Feeling a little bit chillier, lots of sunshine. -1 also the expected high tomorrow in Winnipeg with partly cloudy skies. Now over here in central Canada, Toronto could see up to 2 centimeters of the white stuff tomorrow, high of 4. Ottawa could see 2 to 4 centimeters, 0 is their high. And Montreal could see 60% chance of flurries tomorrow with a high of 4 degrees. As we look further east, we're seeing more precipitation in the form of rain. So Fredericton coming up of a heavy rainfall today. They could still see a 30% chance of showers tomorrow, high of 7, high of 12 in Halifax with 30% chance of showers as well. Charlottetown could see 10 millimeters of rain and then chance of showers later on in the day. And St. John's could also see quite a bit of rain tomorrow, up to 15 millimeters as well, with a high of 11 degrees. So there you go, that is your weather.
Canadian bank executives say an economic rebound is on its way after months of turmoil caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. Banks and governments have been working for months to offset the turmoil with loans, deferrals, and interest rate cuts. Chief executives at BMO and Scotiabank say they see clear signs the stimulus is having an impact. Scotiabank's Brian Porter says he's cautiously optimistic about next year and that optimism will grow if a COVID-19 vaccine is rolled out. Scotiabank is reporting a fourth quarter profit of $1.9 billion as its provisions for credit losses were cut in half over the previous quarter. Earnings were down $2.3 billion in the same period a year ago as revenue declined 6% to $7.5 billion. On an adjusted basis, the bank earned $1.45 per diluted share. That is up from the $1.22 analysts were expecting. Economic growth in Canada missed analysts' expectations despite hitting an annualized pace of 40.5%. The rebound followed a sharp contraction in the previous quarter. Stats Canada says it reflects the reopening of the economy following pandemic-related shutdowns. The historic gain, however, fell short of the 47.6% growth analysts were expecting. Economists say the fourth quarter began with some growth, but another contraction will likely occur this month due to harsh new COVID-19 restrictions. Shares in Imperial Oil were up nearly 3% after it announced plans to write down up to $1.2 billion in Canadian assets. The company says it has reassessed the long-term development plans of its unconventional natural gas portfolio in Alberta. It says it no longer plans to develop assets that will result in a non-cash write-down of up to $1.2 billion in the current quarter. Imperial says the exploration of lands it is shelving have not been developed and are not producing. The company says the move does not include natural gas prospects that are also rich in petroleum liquids. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up 106 points on the day to finish at 17,296. The Dow was up 185 points to 29,823. The S&P 500 was up 40 points to 3662, and the Nasdaq was up 156 points to 12,355. West Texas Intermediate Oil was down 95 cents to 44.39 US per barrel. Natural gas was down a cent to 2.88 US. Gold was up 3 cents to 18.15.27 US an ounce, and silver was even on the day at $24 US an ounce. Wheat is at $270 per metric ton, barley is at $274, canola is at $5.81, and corn is at $293 per metric ton. Live cattle were up 30 cents to 113.18, feeder cattle were up 60 cents to 141.65, and lean hogs were up 18 cents to 68.75. The Canadian dollar was down slightly over the past 24 hours to 77.30 US. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, the City of Lethbridge has extended the mandatory face covering bylaw until at least February 23rd. In a vote of 6-3, City Council voted for the extension, which was set to expire on December 31st. Mayor Chris Spearman says with increased cases of COVID-19, more needs to be done. Spearman adds the Community Standing Policy Committee will discuss another potential extension on February the 11th. A good way of preventing more gun violence in Canada is by making our borders safer. That's according to Brian Sauvé, president of the National Police Federation. He will have more details coming up in an interview with Jeanette Rocher shortly. But first, here's a look what's happening in and around your community.
Here's your Bridge City News community calendar. Experience the magic at the Winter Light Festival at Nikayuko Japanese Garden, beginning December 3rd from 7 to 9:30 p.m. Bundle up and enjoy the massive light display, ice sculptures, and other surprises throughout the garden. COVID-19 restrictions will be observed with one-way pathways along with other safety measures. Tickets must be purchased in advance. Visit nikayuko.com or call 403-328-3511 to purchase yours today. Volunteer Lethbridge and the Lethbridge Senior Citizens Organization are urgently looking for volunteers to take part in their Drive Happiness program. This program is to help seniors in our community who are facing extreme loneliness due to lack of accessible transportation. Volunteers will drive clients to their medical appointments, pick up groceries, and take them to important life activities. If you're interested in this opportunity and for more information, call Chelsea at 403-332-4320 or email volunteer@volunteerlethbridge.com. The Ho Ho Holiday 5K is the most festive fun run in Canada. Combining the magic of the holiday season with community engagement and fitness, this fun run helps raise funds to support Make-A-Wish Canada. Each registration includes a Santa suit, finisher's medal, a holiday treat, and timing app. Going until December 31st, you can join thousands of Santas virtually across Canada, spreading Christmas cheer and helping support Make-A-Wish Canada. For more information, visit hohoholiday5k.com. And that's your Bird City News Community Calendar.
There's been much debate about how best to deal with gun violence in Canada. Some think the federal government's recent ban on handguns doesn't go far enough, while others see it as ineffective and an unnecessary burden placed on law-abiding hunters and target shooters. Joining me via Skype from Ottawa to discuss this is Brian Sauvé, president of the National Police Federation. Brian, hello and welcome to the show.
Oh, good morning. Glad to be here, and thanks for the invitation.
Absolutely. Brian, can you first of all tell us a bit about the NPF, or the National Police Federation? Now, this is the RCMP's union, right? Maybe some people didn't realize the RCMP actually had a union. So how and when did this come about?
Well, you're right. Actually, a lot of Canadians either didn't realize the membership of the RCMP did not have a union, or they assumed that they already did. In 2015, a Supreme Court decision allowed the membership of the RCMP the ability to organize. We founded the National Police Federation in 2016, and it took until July of last year to get through the vote and all of those hurdles in order to be certified. So we've been up and running for a little over a year, and we're in the midst of bargaining the first ever contract for members of the RCMP.
Wow. Well, I think that it will be good to hear from the rank and file members of the RCMP on key issues of concern to the public. One of those, of course, being gun violence. It sounds like officers are struggling that the federal government's recent gun ban legislation may not be the most effective way to reduce gun violence. What are your thoughts?
Well, we did do a bit of a research dive into this, which resulted in our first position paper that came out. Really, it got released because of the last innocent victim, a 12-year-old boy in Toronto who was basically innocent on the side of a road and died due to gunfire from gang violence. So that put a little urgency for us to release this position paper. And ultimately, what we've seen in the Liberal government's proposal or order in council is perhaps a rush to make a decision versus using evidence and data and consultation with all impacted parties.
Okay, do we have any stats on what percentage of gun violence is actually committed by citizens who have a firearms license, who have gone through the proper training and the proper checks? I would guess that that's a pretty small percentage, right?
Well, that we don't know, really. So mainly because a lot of the firearms centers are not fully funded. They're not very well resourced, and the tracing of actual firearms used in crimes is solely at the discretion of the police force investigating that crime. Not all the time do they actually need to trace a firearm used in a crime.
So do we know who is committing the majority of gun violence? Like, is it drug and gang related? Is it primarily smuggled illegal guns?
Most of the data that we've come up with, well, the latest data available through Statistics Canada shows that yes, handguns are a challenge, and illegal handguns used in the commission of offenses or by criminals and gang violence are the leading cause of firearms used in homicides, yes.
Now, part of the federal gun ban legislation is a program to buy back some of the banned firearms. This would be expensive, and would this also take up valuable time and manpower from RCMP officers?
This is one of the challenges that we see. Already, the RCMP is overtaxed and under-resourced. So to add an additional investigational requirement to those members who are already overworked and have way too much on their plate without complementing those rank and file with more members, it becomes a challenge. And you also have to see the estimates provided by the federal government are just that. They are estimates. And, you know, the online registry started out with an estimate and ballooned over time. So could this buyback program balloon as well? We're not sure, but we'd much rather see that money go into strengthening enforcement of the trafficking of illegal firearms, as well as targeting our gang and gang violence problem.
Now, how would the NPF like to see federal money put to more effective use? Do we need to put more money into patrolling our borders to prevent gun smuggling?
Well, that's a start. You know, the integrated border enforcement teams of the RCMP that work in partnership with our colleagues over at the CBSA have had their resources and their funding dried up and pulled away over the last number of years. So if we really want to focus on the illegal trafficking of firearms, then, you know, perhaps we as Canadians decide on focusing on reinforcing those border enforcement teams, making a concerted effort to look at that border, which is the border with the largest manufacturer of small arms in the world, the United States. So there have been a lot of illegally trafficked firearms from the United States that commit crimes in Canada. And you know, you have to wonder if an order in council, if a law is going to be followed by someone who's already skirting the law or not paying attention to the law by committing a firearm offense with an illegally obtained firearm.
And what about more money to target gangs and drug dealing, or perhaps investing in preventative measures dealing with the underlying cause of kids joining gangs, broken families, etc.?
100%, and you know, that's part of a bigger conversation that we've been a part of, and we appreciate being a part of it and look forward to being part of that down the road, is the conversation of how do we end up with people entering a life of crime? Is it poverty? Is it lack of social services? Is it lack of supports in schools? That's a really big conversation, and I hope Canadians are vested in it and finding solutions. But a solid investment in a lot of those social programs could ultimately curb crime at the back end.
Okay, now the National Police Federation has been meeting with MPs this week, sharing some of your concerns. One thing you would like to see is body cameras being made available to your officers?
Yes, so this spring obviously was not the greatest time to be a police officer, whether in the United States or in Canada. And as a result of a lot of interactions that were publicized on media, the federal government came out and basically promised that the RCMP is going to have body-worn cameras. The commissioner embraces that idea. In fact, our membership largely embrace that idea. So we are supporting it. Our position with federal government, though, is that implementing body-worn cameras should be new money added to the existing RCMP budget versus the commissioner having to find an existing $40 to $50 million in order to roll that out.
And another issue you want addressed is the fact that RCMP officers need to have their aging handguns updated and replaced?
We do, and obviously, our membership are there to protect Canadians at all costs. And the sidearms that we have issued to all of our memberships across the country are about 25 to 27 years old. They are starting to show wear and tear. They're starting to show failures. We don't want to end up in a situation where it fails and either one of our members gets hurt or even worse, a member of the public gets hurt. So we've put together a proposal to the federal government to again fund the replacement of those sidearms so that our members can do their job safely at the same time as keeping Canadians safe.
I had no idea a handgun had that kind of a lifespan, almost 30 years old. That's incredible.
Well, yes, they're arguably a few years past replacement date.
Certainly. And I understand that you would also like to see more money invested in better training for officers at the Regina Depot.
We would actually. Our proposal to the government is more about increasing the capacity to train new cadets that choose a career in law enforcement. Right now, they have the capacity and the budgeting to do about 1,100 or so a year, and they graduate around 1,000. Unfortunately, we have an attrition rate of anywhere between 800 and 900. So our net positive is only about 100 new members per year. We are already under-resourced by close to 2,000. And with the increasing mandate, and if there is a shift and a focus towards border integrity, for example, and the illegal trafficking of firearms, we would need an extra 2,000 to 3,000 members on the street. So we'd like to see the federal government invest some money to increase the capacity at Depot to train more and focus on recruiting more Canadians to join the RCMP.
Any thoughts on police relations with the public these days in the midst of ongoing protests demanding that various governments defund the police? You sort of alluded to that a little earlier.
Well, the National Police Federation, we did some polling of Canadians in the last week of June, right about the height of the protest time. And I think Angus Reid did some at the end of September. And then we've also done some specifically in Alberta. And overwhelmingly, even with our poll at the end of June, showed Canadians support police. They have a lot of respect for police officers. They trust police officers, not so much police management as much, but the cop walking the beat every day. There is a lot of trust and a lot of confidence there. Like we're talking border in Alberta, it was a little over 80% have trust and confidence in the police. So I'm not really that concerned about conversations around defunding. I do think we need to have that global conversation about how Canadians support Canadians, and are there services that need to be refunded to an acceptable level based on what we all want to see to lead happy, healthy, and safe lives.
Thanks so much for your time, Brian. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a great afternoon.
A new report from Iran says an attack that killed the alleged architect of Iran's nuclear weapons program was all done remotely. To discuss this in more detail is our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari, joining me once again from Los Angeles. Lisa, the attack was apparently carried out using a remote-controlled machine gun attached to a car? I didn't know that was an option.
Yeah, this is amazing. It's like a movie. They'll hopefully turn this one into a movie because it's just so elaborate. I don't know if you've seen the series Tehran that recently came on Apple TV. This kind of reminds me of that elaborate plan on the ground, having potentially a foreign country involved. That's what the Iranian regime is accusing Israel of, orchestrating all this with the help of the United States. And as of this morning, they added the MEK opposition group to the list of people who are in cahoots with one another to carry out this very elaborate attack. So according to the New York Post, 62 people were involved. This is a real tribe that had to work towards this. 50 of them distracting, the security forces, while the other 12 went in to the actual assassination plot. It's tremendous. It's tremendous, and it's no question. The mainstream media keeps putting up these crazy and ridiculous headlines as to why was this guy killed? Well, why wasn't he killed earlier is the question. So many targets on this guy's back. He was a shadowy commander of the IRGC, the Revolutionary Guard Corps, which is the most brutal and vicious, deadly group, tentacle or arm of the Iranian regime. And this guy, he was the mastermind of their nuclear program, their secret nuclear program. So obviously a lot of targets on his back.
Now, Lisa, Iran says that it's now planning a calculated response after that nuclear scientist was killed. Some say Iran may take revenge on an Israeli city, and that could potentially involve heavy human casualties.
Yeah, so they are, I mean, it's a rumor, not a rumor, I should say, that it was a threat made by an Iranian official that said maybe we should go for the city of Haifa, which is in the northern part of Israel. And, you know, whether it's because of the geographic position or whether it's because a lot of Baha'is live there, that is their headquarters. And as we know, the Iranian regime has a special hatred towards the Baha'i faith. So they are making all sorts of threats. Look, this was a big hit, and I think that that's the takeaway here is that they are so badly surprised. This was a huge, huge asset for them, just like Qasem Soleimani was. So this is two in the same year. And under the Trump administration. So they have a lot of animosity towards the US for this, towards Israel for this, and they are threatening all kinds of retaliation.
Now, speaking of which, according to the Times of Israel, Jerusalem is fearing attacks on Israelis visiting the United Arab Emirates. Tell me more about that.
Israel is, obviously has its own very, very, very sophisticated security apparatus in the country, and they have been dealing in the business of national security for decades now. So they have that down pat. What they don't have control over is when Israelis go and they become more vulnerable in places where they can be reached by Iran's tentacles. So as of late, that the United Arab Emirates and Israel have an economic peace agreement under the Abraham Accords, and there are many Israelis now as tourists traveling to Dubai, traveling to the United Arab Emirates, and the fear is that the retaliation will happen there and not obviously at home where they can control that much more.
U.S. President Donald Trump, in his first interview since Election Day, says the Department of Justice is MIA, missing in action regarding alleged election fraud. That's not really helping his case, is it?
No, it's not. It's not helping when the establishment isn't working hard for him or for this contested election. There was a bipartisan letter that was penned that said the same thing. Stop this, the allegations, and just move on and concede. Look, the people who voted for him feel very differently. There was a CNBC piece that said that there are no people who voted, basically, I mean, this is a generalization, but it's basically saying that the people who voted for Donald Trump all believe that there was voter fraud. So the people who did vote for him feel very strongly for him and for his case, and they hope that he takes this further and further and further until it reaches the Supreme Court, so that hopefully he can prove that he actually was the winner of the election.
Now, a lot of the recounts are taking place right now in Georgia, and as for Wisconsin, the recounts are concluded there, where Joe Biden is still the winner with the recount being completed. How close was it this time in Wisconsin?
Yeah, extremely close. Look, these recounts are coming out, and they're coming out in favor of Joe Biden, and they're coming out with very, very small margins. In most cases, smaller than what was announced even closer to the election. Look, the point is not to recount the ballots, because if they were cheating, those ballots will still be there. The point is to look at the method of counting the ballots, look at the method of voting, look at the actual ballots. When were they turned in? How were they turned in? Were there any ballots that were destroyed in the process? So, the recount is, it's a process, it's a formality, but it's not answering the real questions that many people still have.
Lisa, around 110 people are dead in Nigeria after a suspected attack by Boko Haram. Dozens of farm workers were killed in what many were calling an insane attack.
Yeah, this is a real upsetting attack. I mean, we are immune almost at this point to the attacks that go on by Boko Haram in the continent of Africa. Weekly there are smaller scale type attacks, but this one is a larger one. 110 people. This will go on. This will go on. And, the thing that it brings our attention to is, that Boko Haram is still on, it is still working there. They still have access there. They still have their headquarters there. We're more focused on ISIS, on Al Qaeda, perhaps, and not really focused on Boko Haram and the damage that it's done, the families that have been torn apart, the young girls whose lives have been destroyed by Boko Haram. And the second thing it brings our attention to is the vulnerability of the continent. We know that a lot of Chinese and Russian influences are there now, taking up more and more influence there because of the vulnerability. And that vulnerability lends itself to more terrorism. And I think that's very important to look at. I mean, Africa has never been the popular place on the map to look. It's been more of the Middle East has been the hot spot, and that's where we focus our attention on when it comes to terrorism. But at the Foreign Desk, we try to include stories that are extremely important because that terrorism does travel, whether it's from Africa or the Middle East or anywhere else.
So Lisa, let me ask you something. Why isn't the Nigerian government doing more to protect a lot of these vulnerable people who many times are Christian farmers? These are vicious attacks by this extremist Islamic group.
Yes, extremely. And that's a great question. I think that goes for the entire continent. Why can't they do more? It's almost like what you see in Iraq. Why can't they do more? Look, the government has its hands tied in many cases, particularly in the case of Nigeria. They are a splintered government. They are, they have forces sometimes within government. They feel very threatened against themselves and their families. So it's very difficult to take decisive action against these terrorist groups who have really embedded themselves in the culture of these countries.
Some tragedy in Afghanistan to talk about here today, Lisa. Afghan officials say at least 34 people were killed in separate suicide bombings. Tell me more about those.
Yeah, suicide bombings still going on in Afghanistan. Just last week, we had U.S. officials asking the Taliban and others to basically lay low, at least for a short period of time, so that they can have some semblance of peace, or that they can understand that or trust that the Taliban can take the future of Afghanistan into its possession. And they cannot. They obviously cannot prove that they can do so. We talk about this weekly, you and I, Hal, about Afghanistan, about the turmoil there, about these people, the civilians there who have not seen any semblance of security or peace, and these are civilian areas. I can't emphasize that enough. This is not a war where you're thinking about, people in uniform going out and fighting with the proper gear. These are people who are being killed at school or at church or at, mosque or at, an ice cream shop. This is everyday people that are suffering these types of attacks. And in the case of Afghanistan, it's been decades. And that's one of the reasons why Donald Trump decided to minimize our presence there, because there just is no end in sight for this horrific decades-long war.
The Trump administration has gone on record saying that you should be able to have access to these COVID-19 vaccines in your country beginning, I believe, in January. Here in Canada, pushed back to about September. It's a long wait for us here. But the United Kingdom is stocking up on vaccines and is hoping to start their vaccine shots in a matter of days.
Yes, well, the Europeans are ahead of the United States and Canada in the sense that they have already they rode out their second wave. In many instances, we know that in Italy, for example, in the UK, in France, they had a second shutdown, and they're just beginning to emerge from that. So they are hoping to line up these vaccines. In the case of the UK, you saw the reports how they are just, they can't wait to just line them up, get their people vaccinated, and go about their daily lives. That's the plan. In theory, it sounds okay. We'll see how it actually holds up.
Lisa, I'm wondering if, sometimes people are waiting to maybe get the second or third trials out. It's kind of like when you get a brand new car, a new make and model of a vehicle. You want to make sure the vehicle manufacturer gets it right. You want to buy maybe the fourth or fifth year of that vehicle. I'm wondering if North Americans are thinking something similar instead of getting the first shot. What are you hearing?
Yeah, a lot of people I'm talking to are extremely skittish about going in right away. Having skepticism towards new medicine, just like new technology, as you said, but this is actually entering your body. So they have every right to be somewhat, skeptical of what it is, particularly at the get-go, particularly given that excitement that's, surrounding this. And for young people, I mean, look, you either have to inject yourself with a foreign agent or take the risk of getting something like a cold. And, I think a lot of people are weighing it out that way. For the older population, I think it's much more, detrimental. So they have to think about it. And I think a lot of people talk about how the first rounds of this should be given to the elderly population, and then we'll, move down the ranks from there. This is all new territory for everyone. I think that hopefully we're going to be past an election, hopefully, and we will be able to look at this, hopefully outside the lens of politics and look at it from a science point of view, and you see what works and what doesn't. I'm very, very hopeful, but also going to wait to see what the results are for the first and second rounds.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has gone on record saying he will not make the vaccine mandatory here in Canada. Our Premier here in Alberta said the same thing. Jason Kenney, what about where you are down in the States? Any talk of making the vaccine mandatory?
Yeah, I don't think that's going to go over well with the American people, although I have heard from some lawmakers wanting to make it mandatory, just like they've made masks mandatory, just like they've done other things that are really, infringing on, our rights. It's a slippery slope. I talked about this last week on my podcast about how, the dangers of having these rights taken away from us, and the long lasting effects of that are going to be that our rights will continue to be taken away from us. And it's all in the name of COVID, all in the name of it's for our best, interest and all of that. But I think it's a slippery slope once they start to mandate things that are for our body and to be injected with and things like that. So we'll see.
America's top doctor, Anthony Fauci, says Christmas and New Year's restrictions will have to be necessary due to the holiday coronavirus wave. Tell me more about that.
Oh, Hal, we're used to that here in California. Our governor has basically canceled everything, cancel happiness, because you're not allowed. But meanwhile, he was caught at a restaurant not too long ago celebrating a birthday with other officials that work in the health field here in California. But, they said you couldn't gather at Thanksgiving, you can't gather for Christmas. And I think a lot of people here have quarantine fatigue. They're not going to be as diligent about it, and that's unfortunate. I know that it is spreading, it's a real thing, but I think they should have more faith in people really just being socially distant from one another, especially here in California. The weather is pretty mild all year round, so hopefully we will be able to get together. But I know that there are additional lockdowns in place starting today in California. All restaurants are no longer seating people outdoors, and there are additional restrictions, meaning you should stay at home. New York City is facing the same thing, and we're just tired of it. So we're hoping that by the time the holidays and New Year's come around, that we'll be able to have some semblance of holiday this year.
Political reporter and foreign affairs expert Lisa Daftari, thanks again for joining me from Los Angeles.
My pleasure.
On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless. Thanks for watching.